through here. Today we're going to talk about creating a social media plan. We're going to talk about how to have your social pages and your posts be accessible, and some tips and tricks for doing that. And we're going to talk about sizing your images, and how links might be slightly different for different platforms. And then lastly, we're going to touch on tracking your social media posts and just how to look at the analytics. So bouncing around a little bit today, but we covered a lot in the first training. So this is a little bit of a follow-up, a little bit of a refresher from the previous Canva training we've done. And then also I just want to let everybody know that we're going to have about 15 minutes or so for questions at the end of this training today. So we're probably not going to take too much time, but we wanted to make sure that we have plenty of time for questions, since Molly and I know there's always plenty of questions at the end of these.
Yeah, and this is being recorded, so we'll send the recording out in a follow-up. We'll also have a handout with lots of links and other resources, and any training that we reference will also include a link to that as well.
Yeah, thanks, Molly. All right. So first off, we're going to talk about creating a social media plan. Now this can seem like a daunting thing to go after, but I try to think of it as keeping it pretty simple. When you create a social media plan, and before you dive into any social media channels that you're working on, think about your three main things when you're putting a plan together. What are your goals? Now, your goals can be either kind of general goals for how you want your page to improve over time, or if you're doing a specific social media campaign, maybe that's only a timely thing that's going to last for a month or so. What are your very specific goals for that? Next, what's your audience? Who are you trying to reach when you do this? Like we talked about in our last training, picking your platform might depend on what audience you want to reach. So we know that Twitter, Facebook, Instagram all reach slightly different audiences. So take that into account when you're making your social media plan. Also, I apologize if there's any background noise. There is construction happening outside my window. And then the third thing when working on or building a social media plan is capacity. You are working with a team. Maybe you're kind of working on your own as your own comms department, but think about how much capacity do you actually have? And I always talk about how important it is to be realistic when you build out your goals. We all have very lofty goals, and we want to do a lot. But we need to be realistic with how much capacity we actually have. So just the more realistic you are about that up front, the more likely you are to reach your goals and not feel overwhelmed in the process. And then the other thing that's not on here, that's not on this slide, but something else to consider is just your timeline. What is your timeline to reach these goals? If you're thinking about, maybe a goal is to just increase your followers on your social media page over time, maybe it's a more broad timeline. But if you have a more specific campaign that you're working on, really break down the timeline of, when do things need to be posted? When do you want to see results? Things like that. So that's a little bit of the basics of building out the social media plan. So all of your decisions that you make around social media and some of the things we talked about in the last training should all be based around these main things: your goals, your audience, and what your capacity is. So I'll just give you all an example. So a lot of you may be involved in the National Voter Registration Day coming up. So as an example, say your goal that you want for your organization is to register 100 new voters. That's a really good goal. It's very specific. You have a number attached to that. Now you want to use social media to try to assist in that goal. Next thing is to figure out the audience. Who is your audience? So your audience would be new voters, people who are not registered. Maybe you work in a specific location. So maybe those voters are in the certain location that you work in, and be very specific about what age are these voters that you're trying to reach. Maybe it's a broad range of age, maybe it's a specific age, but if it's more younger voters, then maybe you want to focus your efforts more on Instagram. And then if we're talking about National Voter Registration Day, what's your capacity? So basically, who on my team has time to manage the social media part of this? Think about, if you have organizers, are they going to be working on other things for National Voter Registration Day? And who do you have on your team that can actually dedicate time to social media? And how much time do they realistically have? If they don't have that much time, then maybe pick one social media platform that you really want to focus on, rather than spreading yourself thin and trying to manage a Facebook page, a Twitter page, and an Instagram page. And then lastly, because this example is a very specific day, think about your timeline. So National Voter Registration Day is September 20th. So when I'm working on a big campaign like this, I try to start with the day and then work backwards. So I start thinking about how can I schedule out social media posts. So I know that on the day, I'm going to want to have a post go out every hour or every other hour or something like that. So I might make a plan and a timeline that says on September 20th, I'm going to have this many posts every hour. And then I know that I'm going to want to start to generate more hype the week leading up to National Voter Registration Day. So in that social media schedule, I might plan out some posts to be scheduled. Like the week prior, I want maybe 2 posts about National Voter Registration Day every single day leading up to that. And then maybe 2 weeks prior, I might want to post, 3 posts that week. But when I'm doing campaigns like that, generally I want to have more posts and generate more hype leading up to the day. So that's kind of just an example of how you might build out a social media plan. And then, like I mentioned, at the end of this training, we'll go into analytics a little bit and just kind of take a quick look at how we can look at our metrics to basically look at our metrics that are specifically related to the goals that we create. And so I kind of talked about this a little bit, but also I'm realizing, oh, never mind. We only have 1 slide for this. I talked about this a little bit, but when we're talking about social media plans, we also want to think about setting up a social media schedule. So if we're not talking about a specific campaign, but we're just kind of talking about keeping our pages updated and relevant, and trying to gain more followers and more interactions on a general sense, a tactic that Molly and I both love to use is kind of set up a social media schedule for the year. So this might be pretty general, but kind of go through the year and pick what dates are relevant and important throughout the year. So, maybe Black History Month or Women's History Month, for those of you working in the League of Women Voters, National Voter Registration Day, all kinds of things like that, Indigenous Peoples Day. Pinpoint some of those important dates throughout the year that you can put your message out and kind of start to block off parts of the year or days in the month that make sense that you can build out a social media schedule, so that you're not waking up and starting work every day and thinking, oh, what the heck do I post today? It helps if you block off some time at the beginning of each month and maybe build out a social media schedule, so that you have a general idea of what to do. And then also, I'm sure a lot of you are on our listserv, or on general listservs and get social media toolkits of different kinds all the time. So Molly and I both love to take those toolkits and then copy and paste, and take those posts that are in the toolkits and just schedule them out on our pages. So we don't really have to think about it when it's that day. I'm gonna pass it over to Molly now, and we're gonna transition to accessibility.
Sounds good. Thanks, Erin.
And
thanks
just a reminder, we have questions at the very end. So if you guys have questions about what I talked about, we'll have time to get back to that.
Yeah, and feel free to put those in the chat as we go if you're worried about forgetting them. And also there's construction right next to me, so sorry about that. And just to add on to what Erin said, I think it's really important to think about capacity. I'll just reiterate that Erin and I are both comms people, so we spend tons of time doing social media, but obviously that's not the case for everyone. And so just do as much as you can, but don't feel like you need to be on every platform. Don't feel like you need to be posting like original content every day. You all do so much, so just kind of do what you are able to. So now we're going to talk about accessibility and how to make our social media platforms more accessible. So the first thing we're going to talk about is alt text. So this is a brief description of an image, and it makes content more accessible for people who are blind or low vision. It's often used for like screen reader technology. So for example, if you are looking at an image on social media, you post an image on social media, a screen reader, or even sometimes if you hover your mouse over it, there will be a brief description of your image. And this is especially important for kind of like visually focused platforms, such as Instagram, and making sure that everyone can enjoy your content, everyone can get that information. GIFs, something we talked about in our last training that Erin and I both love. Those little super short videos, they're actually like a series of pictures technically. So for GIFs, make sure you are also including alt text, a brief description of what's happening in that little video, or you can even just include that in the caption, the body of the post. And we're going to do and talk a lot more about alt text on the next slide. We'll do a little example, and we'll talk about how you can insert alt text on Twitter, just as an example. Another important accessibility tool is camel case and social media hashtags. So as we talked about in our last training, a hashtag is something where it's like little hashtags or pound symbol, and then a phrase or a word that helps viewers kind of, it categorizes the information. So for example, hashtag be a voter, if a user were to click on that hashtag, they would likely see lots and lots of different posts that are related to voting and be able to kind of sift through that content. So in this case, camel case, it's making each letter of each word capitalized. So capitalizing the B, the A, and the V so that people can more clearly see that it says be a voter, whereas with hashtags, especially like phrases, if everything was lowercase, it would be kind of difficult to decipher what the hashtag is saying. Next up, and this is also something we're reiterating from our Canva training, which we will link and I definitely recommend checking out, is making sure that the graphics and content you post are really easy to read. So making sure that font is nice and large. I think if you are making a graphic and you have the space, make your font basically as big as you can for it to look good. If it's something that's supposed to read like a sentence, making sure it's formatted in a way that's clear and easy to read. And then also making sure you use colors that are really easy to read as well. So for example, you don't want to have like a white background and pink font, or like light pink font, or like navy blue background and black text. Also, especially assuming you're making like democracy or like voting geared material, making sure that you use fonts that are really easy to read. So don't use like wedding invitation font where it's like really kind of fluttery and like cursive. Just use something that's like pretty straightforward. So like the text on this slide is called Merriweather. So something that is really easy to read. And then video tips. So we're not going to get too much into video, but just wanting to remind you all that if you are posting and creating video, it's really important to include captions in those videos. You can include captions on Canva. Canva is a really great and easy way to write up captions. There are also lots of platforms and tools that have auto-generated captions. I would just say if you use those, make sure you're double checking, because sometimes the auto-generated captions can come out a little weird, especially with like names and proper nouns and stuff like that. And then also if it's needed and possible to include verbal descriptions of what's happening in the video. So for example, if it's just like an interview or someone talking to the camera, that's not really necessary. But if it's kind of like a how-to or someone demonstrating something using a description of the scene is a nice way to make it more accessible. Okay, so now we are going to do a little exercise on alt text. So before I ask y'all to put your alt text in the chat, I'll just give some tips. So keep it specific, simple, and succinct. You know, you don't want to have sentences or paragraphs running on describing the picture. I would recommend keeping it to a sentence or two. Next up is don't editorialize, especially if it's just a stock photo. So I just pulled these photos from Canva. I don't know the people in the pictures, so there's really no need for me to speculate about like how old they are or where they are. I don't know, and it's not necessarily relevant. It might be relevant if it's a picture of like a monument, or that is an important aspect, or it's like a photo of a politician or something, then it might be necessary. But for a stock photo, something that's more decorative, no need to editorialize and try to guess who that person is or what they're going on about. Just describe what you're seeing. Next is don't repeat information that's already available in the caption. So if you're posting about like an event, if you have the name of the event and the time and the date in the caption, even if that's also in the graphic, it's not necessarily needed. You don't need to repeat it in your alt text because that information is already available. Next, and this is something I'm trying to break a habit of, is starting your alt text with image of. It's obviously an image. Alt text is describing an image, so that's a given. So no need to say image of or like graphic of. And then finally, a good tip I read online is think about how you would briefly describe this image if you were just like talking on the phone with someone. So if you're just on the phone with a friend and then you came across this image or this scene, how would you very briefly describe it? So we can first start with the violinist and just drop some alt text that you would use to describe this in the chat. And thank you, Erin, for sharing those resources in the chat. Okay. Yeah, I think that's good. So for the photo, you can put some recommendations for the photo on the right with the vote, but I think it's good. Yep, it's just a woman. I think maybe the all white outfit might be significant. A woman wearing a white outfit, playing violin in front of a window. That's probably what I would say. Looks good. Yeah, I like yours, Amanda. Just 3 people holding up the letters VOTE. Very simple. Nice, yeah. So trying to keep it nice and short to like a sentence. Erin, do you have any other input?
Yeah, I think you guys got it. It's just describing what you see in as much detail as you can without going too crazy on detail.
Awesome. All right, I think we can move on. Okay, so next is actually adding alt text on social media. So every platform is a little different with how you add alt text, and also every platform, especially like Facebook, are constantly making updates. So if you ever are confused or can't find how to edit and add alt text, I would recommend, there's so many great resources out there that can walk you by like a step-by-step tutorial. YouTube how-tos are great. So just as an example, we'll go through how you add alt text on Twitter. And if you have a Twitter, maybe after this training, you can try tweeting out a photo and just giving it a try yourself. So you open up Twitter, you click tweet, you select an image you'd like to share with your audience. And before you hit that tweet button, if you see by this first pink arrow, it's not very well contrasted, but it says add description. So you'll click on that. And then a little box with description will pop up, and then you add your alt text and then press tweet. So pretty simple, and most platforms are pretty similar in that you just press add description, edit, add alt text, something along those lines, add your description, and then you're good to go. Next up, we'll just talk about sizing and links. So this is really mostly a recap from our Canva training, but we just kind of wanted to bring up some of the relevant points to social media. So not every image will fit on each platform. So as we discussed in our Canva training, Canva lets you pick and resize different templates for graphics. So there's one that will say like Instagram post, Facebook post, Twitter post, and that's because every platform has different kind of like optimized shapes that look best. So if you pull up Instagram, you'll notice that it's a complete grid and every picture is like a perfect square. So if you're on Instagram and you're trying to upload a photo that's a rectangle, parts might get chopped off. There might be some awkward blank space at the top or the bottom. So that's why we recommend using Canva, because it's a really easy way to reshape your graphics and make sure everything looks good for each different platform. Something that I would recommend, especially if you're working between Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, is just if you don't like resizing stuff, if you feel like you don't have time, I would just size everything for Instagram. It might not look perfect on Facebook and Twitter, but nothing will get chopped off and everything will be able to fit, which is the most important part, that your audience is able to see your whole message and things aren't like important words aren't being chopped off. So that would be my time-saving hack. I think if you're able to resize it, definitely do so. It's super easy on Canva, but if not, when in doubt, I would just make everything a square. And then of course, if you're like worried about this, you can always preview before you post. Every social media platform offers a preview option. It's a great way to make sure that your graphics and pictures fit well, everything's looking good. And also I always catch lots of spelling errors and such, or I throw in like a random the. So always a good tip. Also a good tip for proofreading is to read your captions like backwards. I don't know, helps me. Okay, and then we're going to talk a little bit about links, and this is just kind of more so to bring up the fact that not every social media platform lets you use the same features. So specifically for links. So if you're on Facebook and Twitter and someone posts a link to like a news story or their website, that's a live link. So it'll be blue and you can just click on it and it takes you right to that web page. So for example, on like Instagram, you can't have a live link. So you can post a link on Instagram, but if the person tries to click on it, nothing will happen. It won't take you to that web page. A screen won't pop up. It's like clicking on any other text. So that's just something to keep in mind. And, on Instagram, especially, for example, you're making like voting content, you're going to want to send people to My Vote to request an absentee ballot or to find their polling place. So there are a few ways around this. For example, you can make something called a link tree. And a link tree is basically a site you would put in your Instagram bio, because you can put a link in your Instagram bio. That's pretty much the only place you can include a link. And then you can add a whole bunch of links. And when you're writing your Instagram caption, you can say, go request a absentee ballot, link in bio. When the person goes to your bio, clicks on the link, can find the link titled absentee ballot request. And there they are on My Vote. So it's a little convoluted, but there are some ways around it. If you want to share like a long link to say a Zoom registration for an event, you can use something called Bitly. And this is when you put a really long link into this program called Bitly, and then it shoots out a much shorter link that someone could type into their browser or visit themselves. But the main takeaway is on Instagram, don't expect your audience to copy and paste a link themselves. So that's why it's not like a great platform to share news stories, and just something to keep in mind when you're sharing content there, that it's more visual. And, you know, if you're sharing like a long link on Instagram for a registration page or something, people probably aren't going to put it in the browser themselves. And then to touch on video again. So video is really great to share on social media. With the rise of TikTok, it is really good for the algorithm. People love short, engaging videos. Of course, they're more time consuming, but I think if you have the chance to make some videos, they're really great and fun to try out. And the length of video that's allowed for different platforms is always changing, always updates. So there's not really like a hard and fast rule. But I think a good thing to keep in mind is to definitely keep the video under 1 minute. And then really the shorter, the better with people's attention span. So if it's like 15, 20 seconds, that's excellent. And then same thing with pictures, like I mentioned, you know, if you're trying to upload like a rectangle picture to Instagram, it might get cut off. Same thing with video, unfortunately. Not every video, if you are like filming it horizontally, is gonna work, or same with vertically. It really varies on the platform. So, and those are all really easy to look up. Again, Canva has the same thing with video where you can resize it. So yeah.
Thanks, Molly. Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. When in doubt, have Canva resize it for you. Does everything for you. Cool. So last thing we're going to talk about is tracking and looking at your results, looking at your analytics, diving into the back end. Honestly, this is something I need to do more of. The more you're looking at the actual tangible results you're getting, the more you know the truth of if you're really hitting your goals. I feel like so many times I just rely on intuition and think like, oh, cool, that post got a lot of engagement, and tap myself on the back. But actually what I should be doing is regularly checking the numbers and paying attention to how it's actually performing compared to other posts. So I just want to do a quick disclaimer, just letting you all know that some of this stuff I'm going to touch on here might be a little bit more advanced, but we're going to try our best to keep it pretty simple, and just kind of give you a quick introduction of where to look for some of the analytics. You know, as soon as I hear the word analytics, my brain is like, get me away from this. But I swear it is not as daunting as it sounds. So I am actually going to, sorry, you guys, get out of here, and I'm going to share my screen with you all as I go through and show you our page, and just kind of click through so you can actually see where to find some of this stuff. First thing I want to just mention though, and I talked about this when I was talking about setting up your goals, is you really need to, when you're looking at analytics and the insights into your page, you should always be looking at them, thinking about what your goals are, because Twitter, Facebook, all the platforms have just endless information that you could go into a wormhole and never come out. But if you go in thinking, okay, my goal was to get 100 more followers in the last 2 months, and that's all I need to find, then looking through some of the analytics doesn't seem so scary. So just always go into this remembering what that social media plan was that you set up, and think about what your goals are, so you're not just kind of diving into everything. So first, I'm going to look at Twitter here. This is our Wisconsin Conservation Voices. This is our Twitter page. So you can look at analytics per post, or you can look at analytics of your whole page. So it depends on what your goals are. Maybe you're doing a specific campaign. Maybe you're just curious, like what times you're posting, and knowing what times a day get the most results from your post. So I'm going to go onto our Twitter page here, and you can see, I was actually kind of curious about this. So this last weekend, we were at an event, and I posted this first picture on a Saturday. And these two pictures are fairly similar. And then I posted this next picture on a Sunday. So I was curious, do I get more engagement on Saturdays than I do on Sundays? So if you see this post, you can see here at the bottom, there's these little bars that say analytics. If you just click on that, it'll pop up and show you the window and say, okay, I got 27 engagements. I made 258 impressions. An impression, it's kind of a loose term, but it essentially means someone who may have scrolled past your post and stopped for a second and looked a little bit longer at it, and it made an impression on them. But engagements are like the people that actually clicked on it or shared it or liked it or something like that. So I can see this post I didn't even write much. I just said vote for our future, but it got a lot of engagement. The next post I posted on a Sunday, didn't get much. I only got 4 engagements and significantly less impressions. So that's how you can do kind of a quick look. So it's not so scary to look at analytics. It's just a click of one button and you can do a quick look and see. And sometimes I honestly just scroll through our page and look at our different posts and see kind of the different reactions I get to different things. Like maybe if I add a photo, do I get more likes? Or if I tag another organization, do I get more likes? You can usually tell by just kind of scrolling through your post to see, to actually pay attention and see what the results are. If your goal is more so a broader thing and you want to see how your page is doing over time on Twitter, you can come in and click more and click analytics. This takes you to the Twitter analytics dashboard. I know this is kind of a lot to look at first, but we can break it down for a second. So this gives me a little 28-day summary. So I've posted less tweets this month. My tweet impressions have gone down, but profile visits have gone up. So maybe if my goal that I set up for my social media plan was to drive more traffic to my social media page, then I don't really care about the impressions. All I care about is the profile visits. I want to see how many people are actually looking at my profile. In that case, say I set my very specific goal of I want 300 more profile visits this month than last month. That's why at the beginning I was saying the more specific you are with your goal, the more you can look at analytics and say, I reached it or I didn't. And what do I need to do to change that? So, so you can go through here. You can scroll down, you can see the summary from each month. And it shows you your highlights and like your top tweet, your top mention, Those kind of things are helpful. Like, you know, it helps me to know what organizations are tagging me. Maybe I need to give those organizations more of a shout out or things like that. And then if you want to look at how your page has been doing over time, all the way at the top here, you can see home. If you click tweets, you can see even more of a breakdown. You can see your top tweets in the last 28 days. Or if I want to change the time period, I can say, let's go from the beginning of the year until today and click update. And this gives me a breakdown over that whole time period. So like I said, this is kind of daunting to look at first, but I just wanted to do a quick breakdown to show you all where to find these things. And just remember that you don't have to use all of this information. Just remember what your goals are and look at the very specific things you need to know. And for a lot of us that are submitting grant proposals, this kind of stuff is super helpful. The other thing I wanted to show you was Facebook. So I think the main things we're using are Twitter and Facebook. If you're using Instagram, Facebook now owns Instagram, so the backend is going to look very similar. So here's our Wisconsin Native Vote Facebook page. I'm going to again talk about looking at the breakdown of just a post and then look at the actual page. So let's see, I can go scroll down here and see, I can click, here's a specific post we did. You can see it's the same post from Twitter, but on Facebook, it got a much better reaction. And I can just click on see insights. And I can see we got 700 impressions, 750 impressions. It reached 750 people. Like I said, these are kind of loose terms that Facebook and Twitter make up. But if you ever wondering what the heck does that mean, you can click on this little info and it'll tell you what reach actually means. The number of people who saw any of your posts at least once. And total insights, you can click and see even more of a breakdown. So you can see how many people reacted to it. We got a lot of likes on that one. You can see people comment, shares, and other clicks. So that's the breakdown of a specific post. And then Facebook uses, if you want to see the more broad insights into your Facebook page, you just have to go, you can do a Google search for the Meta Business Suite, or if you search Facebook Meta Suite, you can get a link to the back end of this. But this is the home page of kind of the breakdown of that Native Vote page. And if you click on insights here, this will give you a quick overview, but we want to see a little bit more details. So we can look at results. Once again, you can change the date range for how long you're looking at. So, you know, once again, going back to our goals, if our goal was to improve our followers this whole year, then we can look at the whole year and see how much progress we made over a year versus just a month. So, you know, you can look at new page likes, page visits, the reach. You can even look at, I mean, the amount of information on the back end here is crazy. But you can look at who your audience is. You can see where people are that are following you. Actually, for us working with this Native Vote program, the location is incredibly useful for us. A lot of our goals are to, we've been working with more and more tribal communities in Wisconsin. So we're trying to reach more of those communities as we partner and build relationships with more of those communities. So having this location breakdown for us is incredibly useful to know where those people are, what communities are tapping into this page. So you can customize this however you want, but to avoid this being daunting, think about your goals before you go into it. And then I'll go back to our presentation here. Last thing I'll talk about real quick is just using hashtags. I know we had a question before about specific methods for creating hashtags. I'll touch on that, but when we're talking about tracking, a hashtag can be very useful to track your campaigns. So the national group that, for those of you that know Anat, she's led a lot of the freedom to vote messaging. They created the hashtag freedom to vote. One, because the term freedom to vote resonates with people, but also they thought about this ahead of time and they chose freedom to vote because it's a unique hashtag. Nobody else was using it. So now they can track on a national level who is using freedom to vote. They can just type in hashtag freedom to vote on Twitter and see how many people are using that all over the place. And there are a lot of people using it. So they're actually like tracking that campaign and paying attention on a national level because people are using this hashtag. You can also do a quick search to see what hashtags are trending on Twitter. You can just kind of see, you can just search vote and look for trending things and pay attention to hashtags that are trending and start to use that in some of your posts. Because some people just search for a hashtag that they're interested in. And then if you use that hashtag, your post starts to show up in that feed. And then as far as specific methods to answer the question from earlier for actually creating hashtags, my main advice is really just to keep it as simple as possible. And if you're going to try to create a new hashtag, just do your research beforehand. Search what hashtags are already out there. You don't want to create what you think is a new hashtag and then do some research and find out that that is being used and in a very different space than what you want it to be. So just keep it simple. Think about what would resonate with people. What do people want to grab onto and repeat? And do your research. And that's all I have for tracking. Seeing there's some questions coming through. Molly, did you want to?
We got some good questions. So the first one we can go over right now is someone asked, how do you find hashtags that are trending? And then I thought maybe you could also talk a bit about how to find like the good hashtags that are kind of being used in the space we're working in.
Yeah. Let me just go back to Twitter for a second. All right, let's see here. Oh. So on the right side, you can see kind of what's happening. And if you click that, you can go here on trending. So the number one trending thing in the United States is Holland, Manchester. So not all of this is going to be relevant, although you can use it sometimes to kind of jump onto a trend that's happening and then relate it back to your work. If you wanted to just kind of see something that's maybe more related to what we're talking about, just search vote without a hashtag. And you can get slightly more relevant content. Sometimes I'll just search vote and I'll click near me so that I can get things that are maybe more specific to Wisconsin. So when you just search vote without a hashtag, then that can include if someone says vote just in the body of their tweet, or like, for instance, here, maybe this isn't relevant to the voting we want, but you can at least narrow down your searches in different ways. Or sometimes I'll search vote, and then I'll click people I follow. So, what up, League of Women Voters? There's, I follow them. I can get a lot more relevant content that way. And maybe I'm just looking for more content that day. So I might just search vote, people I'm following, and then like, cool, now I have content that I can just reshare. So that's a helpful way if you're just in need of content. And then if you want to just search a specific hashtag, you can just type in hashtag freedom to vote, and see what comes up. So you can see people who have used freedom to vote and how it's being used. So like if I was going to create a new hashtag, I would search that hashtag here and see how it's being used already.
Yeah, and a lot of toolkits we share out also have hashtags, and just following other pro-democracy groups in Wisconsin, you can just kind of see the hashtags that they tend to use and use those as well. So I'm going to go back up through the chat. So Beth asked, how do you make sure your graphic on your webpage is sized appropriately for phones and laptops or computers?
Yeah. So this is a great question. Thanks for asking it, Beth. So there's no way to change the shape of an image once it's posted, but you should do some research and look at how your website is set up ahead of time. So like we use Squarespace for one of our websites, and they do a really good job of resizing web pages for phones and also for desktops. So the actual image proportions will stay the same, but maybe on your website, you might have the image and then the text on the side of it. But the website has it built in its functionality that when someone looks at it on a phone, then that horizontal image would be stacked with the text underneath it. And, Twitter and Facebook automatically do that as well. So I would just say, do a little research into how your website functions. And a lot of websites have a preview option. So you can see the page and like preview it on how it looks on a phone. So you can pay attention to that before you actually publish it.
And then Marcy asked, how does someone set good social media goals? She said, I have no idea what would be realistic. And I said, I think if you're just getting started, if you're new to this, maybe just pick a number and then start to see what's happening. I think goals can always be adjusted and are flexible as you go. So just kind of start to check out those numbers, do a little bit looking at the analytics and go from there. Erin, do you have anything else said?
Yeah, I'm such a nerd. I have a background in business and I can go down wormholes of how to set good goals. But if you have never heard of SMART goals before, I highly recommend doing a quick Google search like I'm doing now, and looking up SMART goals. So SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. I won't bore you all with that right now, but it's definitely worth a quick read. There's a million articles on SMART goals, but it's a lot of what I was talking about before. Make your goals specific and make them achievable. If you create a goal that says, I want 1,000 new followers in 2 months, I don't think that's achievable. But I think it's okay to start small and work your way up. So I would look into that. And I think that's relevant to all kinds of planning, not just social media plans.
That's really helpful. Thanks, Erin.
Mhm.
And then we have some questions just about different definitions of terms. So reach, for example, reach is when someone sees at least one time either your page or content from your page. And then a follower is someone who has clicked follow or like subscribed to your page and to seeing your content. And then what is helpful about like Facebook analytics is that you can hover over these terms and it gives you a nice little definition, because I also get mixed up with all of the different terms as well.
Yeah.
And also they're pretty similar, so, you know, relatively similar. So
yeah. If I'm ever like recording analytics, if it's for a grant proposal or just for whatever goal I'm doing, I probably shouldn't say this in a social media training, but I think reach and impressions are basically the same thing. So
yeah.
I think it's fine. I think in general, like reach and impressions are, you know, like I said, did you make an impression on people? That's essentially what it is. They didn't necessarily click on your post or engage with it, but they may have slowed down when they're scrolling through and taken a little bit longer to read it. That's an impression. And I think it's like a black hole for Facebook and Twitter and all these platforms of how they actually measure that. I have no idea how that's actually measured, but it's built into their algorithms somehow.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I think don't feel like you need to be keeping intensive track of all of these different people you're reaching, impressions, or all of these different terms. You know, do what's helpful to you and what's helpful for you to achieve your goals. Really good question here in the chat. What are some good techniques for changing likes, I guess people who like your content, into followers?
Yeah. Honestly, sometimes just ask. I think that's underrated, but sometimes I throw a post out there and I say, if you're not following our page, please give us a follow to make sure you get regular content. You know, if people are liking regularly, this is what I'm talking about with paying attention to some of your analytics. Like when you scroll through your page, pay close attention to the posts that are getting more likes and interactions, and see if you can spot any trends. Like, is it all the ones with photos, or is it all of the posts that say the word you, that are more personalized posts? Just try to pay attention to some of those things. And then the more posts that you put out where people are liking, if people keep liking your stuff, they'll probably follow your page eventually. But also don't be afraid to just ask. And sometimes we send it out in our member emails too. We'll just put a PS at the bottom of our member email and say, hey, are you paying attention, or are you following our pages? Here are the links to our social media pages.
And then we have a question. So this is regarding the analytics and like the access you have to that on Facebook. So Carlene asked, in order to get this kind of information, do you have to have a business page? Does it work with a group page, like a Facebook group?
That is a good question. I think I could be wrong on this. I think you need to have a business page. Molly, do you know?
I think so as well. To be honest though, Facebook changes stuff a lot. So I could double check on that, but I do think you need a business page. You might have access to some analytics, but I think to like everything that Erin was showing, I don't think that's what it looks like for a Facebook group.
Yeah, and I definitely know.
I'm looking at our group page and we can see participants and requests, but there's not any kind of insight stuff here. You know, there's engagement and growth, but not the kind of thing that that you can see on the page.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm not surprised by that because Facebook wants to set everything up so that you have to pay. And Facebook groups are incredibly powerful because you have people that joined something based on their interest. But of course, Facebook wants you to pay for things when you have a Facebook page. I think they want to encourage you to get like a business page, and then it's easier for them to get you to pay for things.
And then someone asked on Instagram, what's the difference between followers and following? So followers are people who have clicked follow on your profile and basically subscribe to seeing your content. And then your following are the other groups you've done the same to. So when you're looking through your feed, you're looking at the people who you yourself have followed, you're following. So just kind of the opposite. Let's see, we have a few people who are hoping, Erin, maybe you could briefly touch on the like boost groups very quickly.
Yes, thank you guys for asking that. Yeah, so I talked a little bit about this in our last training, but the idea is getting around having to pay for everything. Facebook always says, do you want to boost this post and put some money behind it? Don't do that. If you're gonna pay for something, do it the proper way and set up an ad. But to get around paying for it, you can set up, people call it a boosting group. So it's a way to organically boost or get your post in front of more people. So the idea is that Facebook, Twitter have algorithms that the more people like and share and comment on a post, the more it's going to be seen just naturally, because Facebook and Twitter want people to see things that are trending and interesting, and that's why the algorithm is built that way. So if you can cheat the system and create either an email chain or a Facebook messaging group with just like a handful of staff members or a handful of friends, and sent, like, say you have a big day happening, National Voter Registration Day, and you want your post to reach a whole bunch more people. But in order to do that, you need a bunch of people to like it and comment on it in the first place. So I might post something that says, hey, make sure you register to vote today. It's National Voter Registration Day. So I'll copy the link for that exact post, and then I'll share it in that email chain or in the Facebook message that we have going and say, hey friends, can you all like and add a comment to this and share it, so that this post organically reaches more people. Does that make sense to everyone? I know it's kind of complicated, but I can also show you real quick, like, say this was part of a specific campaign and we wanted this specific image to reach a whole bunch of people. So I might post this, but ahead of time, I'll get maybe 10 staff and board members together and send out an email and say, hey, everyone, just so you know, I'm going to be posting this post on Wednesday at 4 o'clock. I need you all to get ready to jump on and share this. And then I would right click, copy the link to this direct post, and then I would paste that exact link in the email and say, okay, everybody go, everybody like, comment, and share this. And then when it has like all these likes, then Twitter's gonna naturally show it to more people. So that's the idea behind that.
Awesome. I hope we got most everyone's questions because we are out of time, but I put Erin's email and my own email in the chat. So if you have any questions, comments, or other themed trainings you'd like to see in the future, let us know, and we'll follow up probably tomorrow with the recording as well as the other resources we mentioned and other handouts. But thank you all so much for attending.
Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate you all being here.
Take care.